welcome again, welcome upstairs. And again, thank you to ASNF Film Festival, and I want to introduce you to our guest feature artist, Manuel and Antonio, and they'll talk about your volcanoes.
Hello everybody, my name is Manu, I'm chairman of Epupillan. I'm a part of the Catrileo+Carrión Community. I'm here with Antonio, but we're also here with Constanza, Alejandra, and Marco. We are all siblings, we are 5, 2 spirited or queer, whatever, that are not straight persons. And we are siblings also. We're married, but both are siblings, so it's like 2 families, 2 queer families that came together. Oh, yes, and we So, yeah, first of all, thanks to the land, thanks to for receiving us, to the spirits that are here present today. Thank you also to everybody that's here, also sharing the space today. It's very moving for us to be being here after 4 years, like he was saying. I also want to acknowledge Sojin, who's the one who introduced us to Cecilia, who's the one about things. Yeah, and also Laura is also connected with Sojin. So it's been really amazing being here, like a dream, also sharing with Jason, seeing how even before we started working, our works were connected, and the questions, the experiences. So we're very thankful for that. I want now to introduce themselves.
Mari mari kompuche, ncheta Antonio Calibaka Kilopine, ncheta Nirekafe ka willing to bife, rume manyukulen tufachi tagun ka tufachi mangelegun, rume manyukulen tufachi wifi Epupillan meu, welu rume manyukulen tufachi tagun, yola. Hello everyone, my name is Antonio Catrileo. I'm so happy to be here. It's a, how commoners say that it's a dream for us. Travel to this space, we made a long trip, we lost our baggage, and that, yeah, but then we found it. But it was a really hard moment, because in one of the luggage we have these pieces of women pieces. So I would like to talking about that, but before I would like to also acknowledge our grateful for Liz, for Jason, for all the Harbor Collective, Asinapka Film Festival, and also for this space, the Gallery101. Yeah, we are so grateful for this space, for joy, for makes new relatives. That is the most important for us, because we are a community and we claim this political and spiritual space in Chile, because we are Mapuche, we are indigenous, but at the same time we are two-spirited, and a lot of homophobia and transphobia are internalized in our indigenous community as a consequence of the evangelization and the colonization process. So it's really hard sometimes claim our existence in our communities. So we decide to not just recognize as a family. We say with too much strength that we are a community, and now we are invited for many spaces in our context in Chile, like, because I don't know, like 7 years ago it was impossible for two-spirit, queer, trans, non-binary folks are welcome in ceremony, for example. Now we are, through our artistic practice, we could sensibilize more people, our own communities, about the importance that who we are, right? So for that reason, when we came here and our lugares are losing we suffer, we feel a lot of pain, because these woven pieces represent for us our ancestors. And we losing again, and we thinking a lot about the impossibility to touch, to have a conversation or a relation with this history. But I would like to move the emotion for a most joyful place, because this exhibition is also an important contribution to talking about how to stop to reproducing this long genealogy of damage, because the settler, the colonizer, the anthropologist, the psychiatrists, the historians create narratives about indigenous people like with bad connotations. So we're trying to escape to this genealogy of damage, of death. So when we navigate the archives, we are really respectful about that, and we decide to don't reproduce, and sometimes we decide don't working with the representation, because when we are looking at this kind of archives, we just saw this horrible representation about my ancestors. So this work is more poetic, it's more, we put more intention in weaving together these, we taking the images of how geologists create create damage mapping, like when the volcanoes explode, they trying to do in a kind of cartography of how the damage of the lava, right, modify the territory. But when we saw these maps, we still thinking about damage, and we trying to creating this with our two-spirited perspective of vision. We look in these volcanoes as ancestors, and that is important because in our context, we claim this, the word Epupillan. That's Epu means two, and Pillan is a non-human spirit. Especially the Pillan lives in the inside of the volcanoes. So there is a connection, and also we could translate Epupillan as a two volcanoes, not just a two spirit. A lot of Mapuche people laugh of us when we say that we are Epupillan as a two volcanoes. They say, how you could be a two volcanoes? This is impossible. But we respond with, you don't know how we feel. Sometimes we feel like a volcano, and especially with two volcanoes, like we're connecting with the energy of creation, but at the same time the destruction. And we would like to destroy the patriarchy. We would like to destroy the patriarchy or all of this damage. These woven pieces are made by our siblings, Goti, Manku, and Alejandra. They are inspired in specific volcanoes that they are important, emotionally important. And we, with Manu, we create these videos. I'm trying to create this space like a video installation, but for us it's also a kind of transformative justice today to say we are here and we are creative, and we could destroy everything if we want.
I would like to add something important, that the word Epupillan, we won't find it in the archives, but we heard it from elders that survived the HIV crisis in the 90s in Chile, two-spirited elders, and also mostly not spirited women, but that they knew an uncle, a great-granduncle, and that they knew that that was the word. So it's not only our creation, which if it's that is the case, I feel like that is okay too. But this is connected to a memory that survived the archives. So for us, it's very important to challenge that. And maybe something about the pieces. This piece has, this installation is called Pillanlectics I, like a dialectic but with pillans, with volcanoes. So what would be that relationship? It's a question. And it's one because we realized that there was so much, because Chile, the Andes, is such a young core of mountains that we are in the ring of fire. That's where Chile is, in the ring of fire. So what you're gonna see is the 17th and 18th centuries moments where two or more volcanoes exploded at the same time. So when you see these 4 volcanoes, it's because there's a year where these 4 volcanoes exploded, and the archive that you would see there, and there, like small beads, is the only archive from the 17th century, that shows a volcano. And it's a specific moment when a big volcano exploded, and the chronist wrote that a monster came out of the volcano. And that monster stopped the war between the Spaniards and the Mapuches. So also that is something that we're trying to connect with that energy to, like what energy takes the land to say stop it, like stop it. You humans, stop it for a while, please. So that's where that iteration of the video is that. It's like all of these moments that we are connecting through painting, and then the painting had a lot of filming in the studio, edit, post-production, but that's the main goal, like creating these imagined conversations, and it connects with the work of Jason in terms of video, because we didn't speak about that before, but when we came here and we saw our work, we realized about that, the opacities, this like messiness of connecting things through the media. It's also very present in the work, not only as something analog and something very digital, but something very much like this, right? Like how to show because they're different volcanoes, but it's the same land, it's the same lava, right? That can destroy, but also creates life. The minerals that are there, all of the things that the volcanoes bring from the earth to the surface is what created the land where we are on, everywhere. So yeah, and maybe the audio, a little bit about the audio. The audio is very immersive. It has like this sound of lava that we created, we downloaded and we played with it, and then we created like different sounds for each volcano to create like a little bit of rhythm. But it's a very like a piece thought out to be just witnessed and maybe walk around, see also the backside of these pieces that are very important. You could see the process there, tension or relaxation during with the reading. And like Antonio was saying, each volcano is special for somebody else, for somebody in the community, but some of them wrote letters to the volcanoes, but that's part of an internal process. We don't feel comfortable sharing, but they told us that we should set these things, that they're also connected with them. We have a lot of media about volcanoes in Chile, like in the news. Everybody has a connection. Like, oh, I remember when I saw this horse running away from a volcano, and I was hearing about the horse. So all of that is also, we believe, is part of our sensitivity or our connections as to spirit. Like people with connected with the land, with the animals, with the trees. So, yeah. If anybody has a question, yes.
Can you talk to us about your manifesto?
Oh yeah, that manifesto is important. We wrote that in 2020. We were commissioned by an online magazine in Mexico, and when we got the invitation, Antonio was researching about this history, particularly about the 17th century when this volcano exploded, and this archive that you can see there shows some of it. And the way we work is that one of the community brings a reflection or a question. So it was this invitation, and then there was this question about the volcanoes, and the call was about solidarity throughout the Pacific. So we said, okay, let's talk about like the ring of fire, and let's bring in a focus on a certain moment to try to understand like these geological forces as a way of connecting to a non-human force that can also suspend colonial identities or colonialism or coloniality. In Latin America we talk a lot about coloniality. So a way of understanding things not only as the historical event. So I think that's the importance of that manifesto. You're gonna see there like the most important paragraphs, and you can also access through the QR code to the online full version.
This text, at the beginning, it was a more intellectual idea that I was navigating at this time, like researching in the archives about natural disaster. But then I was thinking that it was so boring. Like nobody cares all of this information in academic space. So I decided to talk with my community and propose this. I have all of these archives, all of this material, and I think that, what do you think? And Michael, God, Alejandra, Manu started to creating a beautiful conversation with me. And so all of this research don't belong to me, it's part of the community. I just mobilize this question to put in a common terms. And this text, it was translated in Portuguese because I participated in a network from indigenous and trans feminist activists and academics. So they translate in Portuguese. So this text circulates not just in Latin America with Spanish language experience. It's also, we made a lot of connection with our folks in Brazil. And for us, they makes a lot of sense too. So it's really beautiful how this text, all this idea now is here. And we are really excited to also how these questions could be also catalyzed other questions for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And there is a master class tomorrow at 1 o'clock here at Gallery 101, so please, you're all invited. Thank you.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
I'm just going to take off the mask because I know your work quite well, and you always talk about the looking at the non-human as an archive that can really tell us, inform us about history, about a place. So I just really was curious to hear more about that relationship that you have to, to looking at the world, to your context and nature, and taking that as an archive. And in this case, I wonder how that translates, because they have another work where they work with a mountain of sawdust that has been accumulating over the period of colonization, and so you kind of outline the history of Chile through that sawdust mountain. So I'm also curious to know like what the translation of the volcanoes would be for you in terms of like in that kind of context. So
I think it's more challenging because it's fluid. I think volcanoes, you see them as something like big, they're there, it's a mountain. But actually the volcano is the connection to the more fluids, the magma and the lava. So I think it's hard to do the same kind of like approach to linear time. So that's for now what we're doing is separating them in linear time, in human time. But what we're trying to do is to see if there is some kind of like pattern, some kind of like poetic or some kind of like gesture that the volcanoes are suggesting to us to say, hey, this is the way that I deal with all of this energy. So it's connected to the work of the sawdust because it's the same like connection with something that's pretty much like dead for the way we understand living as humans, or we have been taught. But I think that land, even the rocks are alive, they have agents. So I think that's a pretty radical way of seeing it. And even though that can be found in new materialisms and all that theory, this is something that I personally we found in Mapuche Ratifan, or in Mapuche epistemology. When they say that everything has a spirit or a ñen, an owner or a dueño in Spanish, they're not saying necessarily that there's a whole being, an abstract being. Sometimes, yeah, there is something that powerful, but they're talking about relationality, about acknowledging that there's somebody else there in that plant. It makes you create a different relationship with it, because it's not just there for you. So I think we're trying to work against colonialism, anthropocentrism, which we believe they're all kind of connected differently. And the last thing I would say about like materials would be like we come from the global south, in particular from Chile, where we are just a mine of copper, lithium, and some wood. So also we think about that. What does it mean that, for example, we live now in California? California wants to electrify all their cities by 2030, I think. And it sounds great. Everybody's going to be driving an electric car, right? But where is the lithium coming from? And we know where it's from. Where it's going to come from? From an indigenous community that lives in between Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile in the Andes, where there's like 45% of the lithium in the world there. So what's the cost of the electrification of I'm going to say a nation, California is huge, of a whole like state.
One state.
One state, it's going to cost one world, right?
The
Koya people. So I think that also it's more political, but it's also very much connected with our spiritual way of understanding matter, materials, and all of that. Like, even with the machines that we use to film, they have copper, they have lithium.
Yeah.
So how to honor that too? And that's a question. We're not outside of that relationship. We're in that too. How do we do something with that? I think that's always present in our work, and we try to show it in different ways too. Thank you.